Hi, this is Chris Hickman with Decision First Technologies. In this video, I want to give you a demonstration of the SAP BusinessObjects Dashboards application. The Dashboards application allows you to build professionally authored dashboards that provide a very polished look and a very interactive feel to your dashboards and your data. So I'm going to jump straight over into my demo system. I'm going to export or exit out of this system, jump straight over into my demo system. So the Dashboards application is an installation that you perform on the desktop. So I'll just go ahead and launch Dashboards. The first thing you come up into is a home screen. So I just want to start with a blank model. So I'm just going to start with, uncheck the start page and just go straight into my model. So with the interface here, there's several parts to the interface. First of all, we have our menu bars up top. We have our windows here for components, object browser, query browser, and mobile compatibility information. We of course have our dashboard canvas. We have our canvas properties here on the right side. And then down on the bottom we have an embedded version of Excel so that we can import our data, we can embed our data directly inside of Excel, and we can manipulate the data using standard Excel techniques. And then we can bind the data from Excel directly into the components in the dashboard. So the first thing that I typically do whenever I design a dashboard is I of course go through my standard requirements elicitation. I determine how my dashboard is going to look and function. What questions do I want to have answered? What business questions do I want to have answered by the dashboards? And what's the most effective way to design the dashboard to answer those questions? But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a quick dashboard. So I'm going to open up my components. And in the components we have 3 different ways to list our components. I like the tree view because I've gotten accustomed to the different categorizations. You can go to a list view and see all the components that are available to us. You can also go to a category view and view the same categories, but just see a snapshot of each of the objects, each of the components. So you have a drop down here. One of the newest features of dashboards is the ability to go mobile, because the dashboards application is natively a Flash-based application. SAP has built in a system that allows us to export the data as to be rendered in HTML5 so that we can extend these dashboards out to mobile devices that don't support Flash, like the Apple devices, like the iPad. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick all. I'm going to go into charts. I'm going to grab a pie chart, drag it and drop it out onto my canvas. I'm going to go back into components. I want to grab, we'll go into selectors. I want to grab a scorecard, drop it out here. And then just for some interactivity, I'm going to pick single value. I'm going to pull out a horizontal slider and drop that in. Okay. So I'm going to select all of my components and move them over so that I can see them all. Now we need a little bit of data that we can use in our dashboard. So we have a few ways of linking up data. We can of course use our data manager. So if we go into data, into connections, we have a lot of different ways that we can connect to data, particularly query as a web service or standard web services, NetWeaver BW connections if we'd like to use those, Crystal Reports data consumers to embed dashboards inside of Crystal Reports, external interface connection to embed these dashboards inside of outside portal applications that use JavaScript, Live Office connections, Excel maps, and so forth. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to embed the data directly inside of Excel. So let's put in 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012, and 2013. And I always like to randomize data, so I'm going to do rand between, say, 0 and 500. So it'll just give me a random number. And I'll cut and paste that down. And then copy the whole row, or the whole column there, paste special, and just use values. So that way I get rid of that formula so that my values aren't constantly changing. So now I've got 2 columns. I've got year, and I've got whatever you'd like to call this. We can call this sales revenues or sales. So we call this year and sales. Now I want to bind this up to my pie chart. So I select the pie chart, and you'll notice that my properties of the pie chart automatically update. I can change this to sales by year, and just to save space I'm going to get rid of my subtitle, and you'll notice as soon as I change things in my properties it changes things in my dashboard. I'm going to bind up my data, so my data values here, you'll notice that my pie chart updates and my legend values, so my labels here, and there we are. I'm going to go over to my scorecard, and I'm going to bind that scorecard up to the same data. There we are. And with my slider, so now the slider provides a level of interactivity to my dashboards. With the slider, let's say I want to take my sales revenue figures and I want to multiply it times a percentage of the slider value. So the slider can slide from 0 to 100. So what we say is we take the slider data and we embed it in cell E1. And I always like to color code these things to tell me that this is input from the slider. And so we can tell it to start at 0. We can tell it to go to 50, and you'll notice how the slider jumps up to 50. We can go to 75, and you'll notice how it jumps up to 75. So what I want to do is I want to take that percentage and I want to multiply the sales figure by that percentage and then add it back to itself. So that formula would be something like equals this plus parentheses that times 1 plus that divided by 100. And just for order, let's put in some parentheses here. Okay. So if we say 0 here, we go back to, let's just take out that B2 addition because we don't necessarily need it. All right. Of course, this always requires some manipulation of the data. So 10 is 10%. So, and let's see, times 1 plus that. That's better. So 484, we wanted to do 10%, that's adding 10%. If we want to do 50%, that's adding 50%. Of course, 100% is that. So then I can take this value and I just want to hard code that, or set it to equal, always equal to that cell. All right, so now we've got that. So what I can do here is I go back to my scorecard properties, bind that up, and I want to include my new column. Plus tax, or plus whatever you'd like to call that. All right, and then now the sales by year, instead of binding that to the hard-coded column, I'm going to bind the values up to the dynamic column. All right. So now we've added some interactivity from the slider, and the last thing I like to do is resize my canvas to fit the components and bump it out a little bit to give myself some margin. So I'm going to resize the pie chart here just to pull this down a bit, pull in my slider a little bit. Okay, so that I can see the value over there on the right side, and I'm going to preview this. So there's my dashboard, and I can mouse over the individual pieces of the pie and I can see how they work. And then now you'll notice that the chart here updates, but of course, I'm sorry, the scorecard updates with the multiplication, but the chart doesn't update because the relative values are all the same. So you'll notice that the values are all there, and they'll change with the slider here, but the representation stays the same. So that's a very quick dashboard with some interactivity so that we could take a value, multiply it by a set value, and then apply that to a chart. So the last thing that I can do here is I can save this. So I can save this locally here, and that's fine. I'll just save this off as sales data. So I can save the dashboard locally. I can also take the dashboard, go File, Save to Platform As, and I can save the dashboard for mobile, for desktop, or for mobile and desktop. So I like to do mobile and desktop just in case I want to take this to my iPad. And log into the Business Objects environment, go into my public folder, and save this off as sales data. There we are. And now, so it generates the Flash version of the dashboard, generates the HTML5 version of the dashboard, and we're all ready to go. One thing that I like to do is look at the mobile compatibility and just make sure that all of the objects that we've got in the dashboard are compatible for the mobile devices that don't run Flash. So you can see here that we have a couple of warning messages. There's nothing in red here, so there's nothing that's not supported. Show lines and the pie chart is not supported, so you won't see the lines there. Enable data animation is not supported, so you just won't see the pie chart fan out like it does in the Flash view. And then symbol color is not supported, so we don't have any coloring in here, so that really doesn't apply to us. So now we could send this out to the iPad and it would look just fine. So what I want to do, I'll close out of here and make sure we save the changes and log into my Launchpad. And using single sign-on, it takes me right in. I'm going to go into my documents and go into folders, go into CH. And we will find our sales data and we'll execute the dashboard. So there's our dashboard running inside of our portal or inside of the Launchpad, and you can see that I can still mouse over, I can still manipulate the slider and have it change the values in my scorecard, and then we can also move back over into the pie chart and see how the values are affected over in the pie chart. Okay. So, and then we could also, like I've been mentioning, publish this out to your mobile device so that whenever you bring up your iPad, you bring up the the SAP BI application on your iPad, you can find sales data listed as one of the applications on your iPad. Okay, so I'll go back into the PowerPoint and bring up some contact information. So again, my name is Chris Hickman. You can email me at chris.hickman@decisionfirst.com. You can find me on Twitter at @CHickman72.